I did 72 capes for one guy. Like, he showed me his PayPal balance and it was $1.7 million.
Being so good at a video game you get paid for it is a dream for millions of people. One item has allowed hundreds of skilled players to follow that dream, but at a cost. Today, I talked to one of RuneScape's oldest and largest Infernal Cape sellers. You'll find out how much they're making, the drama involved between sellers, and all the little secrets that have never been made public before. Now, when I make videos like this, I get comments like, "You're just promoting rule breaking. Everybody who watches this video is gonna go buy a cape and get banned because of you." I could lecture you all day about why you shouldn't buy one, and you'll see in just a bit how incredibly risky buying a cape can be. In fact, that alone should be enough to deter most people, but if it's not, Jagex frequently catches and bans cape buyers. It is against the game rules. Now, one thing I will say is, buying this cape will rob you of one of the best experiences you will ever have in Old School RuneScape. Nothing gave me a better feeling than getting my first Infernal cape, and I've never been able to recapture that feeling. Oh well, with that out of the way, our story begins in June of 2017. The Inferno had just released and it was seemingly impossible. A grueling, fast-paced challenge with multiple bosses and 69 waves. Yes, the funny number. It took almost 48 hours for the first player, Wooks, to beat it, and he's widely known as one of the game's best players. So everyone else was quickly starting to realize, hey, maybe I can't do the Inferno. Getting a fire cape from Jad already makes me shake like a leaf, so how could I possibly fight 3 of them at the same time? Now this is where the main character of our story comes in. I don't want to use his real name because obviously I don't want to direct anyone to buy capes, so his name will be Caper, because that's literally what he does. He sells capes, and people in the community actually refer to Infernal cape sellers as capers. Caper had just graduated college and needed a way to pay off his student loans. Sure, he could just work a job related to his degree, which he did, but if he used his spare time on a side hustle, he could pay it back much faster. At the time, he was actually already making money through video games. He was doing something called elo boosting in League of Legends. Essentially, he'd play on other people's accounts and win games in order to boost their rank. The higher rank they wanted, the more they'd pay. Caper was happy to be making money, but he was quickly getting bored of League of Legends. So, a friend came to him with an offer at the perfect time. The Inferno was about to release, and his friend wanted them to learn it together.
I was like, well, you know, I used to play the game for a lot of fun and it was, you know, good nostalgia and things like that. And he was like, we're gonna make some money this time.
So had you played any Old School like casually before starting again?
I'd played a little bit. I hybrid before, back in RS2, and obviously I was doing like high octane content with League. I was used to like the strong intensity kind of thing. So it wasn't as bad. So when I came back, I came back like a couple weeks before it was released, and I was starting to play again. Started breeding a little bit, you know, getting back in the groove for things. And so whenever the Inferno came out, I was like, okay, we're ready to go. And my friend learned it, and I was learning it at the same time. He learned it a little bit faster than I did. I think he finished his first cape like 12 days after release, and then I think I finished mine like 15 or 16 days after release.
There was already a massive market of players who wanted to buy capes. I mean, who wouldn't? I remember those first weeks, and anyone with an Infernal cape was the center of attention everywhere they went. As a result, cape sellers priced their services, well, fairly? At the time, the average Infernal cape would cost you around 500 million GP. GP was selling for about $1 per mil, so that's $500 just for really mainly bragging rights. Now, some of you might be thinking $500, that's a lot of money, but it gets even crazier. At the time, every account completing the Inferno was extremely high level and had some of the best gear in the game. Trying to complete the Inferno without that was, and still is, extremely difficult. So this meant you'd likely need to have, at minimum, 2 billion GP worth of gear. So you'd need $2,000 worth of equipment, a $500 service fee, an account with hundreds of hours of training, and then you'd have to trust the seller not to scam you. But this is where Caper differed from most sellers.
If somebody's gonna pay me 500 mil, but a T-Bow's like 2.5 bill or something like that, they're not gonna trust me because they're risking more than they've paid me already. And I found out real quick that if I told them you can give me an ACB instead, they were a lot more likely to sign up. It wasn't more than what I was charging for the cape. So it brought a lot of people to me because they were like, oh, I don't have any risk on this besides like a crappy gear setup. I would do it in standard void and send it.
He didn't market himself as hard as other sellers, but his price point really made him stand out. Now, initially, cape sellers were only offering their services to high-level accounts. You might think that it's because the Inferno was so hard, sellers couldn't do them on lower-level accounts. Well, that's part of it, it's not the whole story. So, what accounts did you offer when you first started?
Max Main and Med. Those were the only 2 account types we did. To give you a time frame, I started offering Zerkers 2 months after that, and then Pures a month after that. But I told people even back then that Pures weren't worth it because there were so few people that could do capes in general that every Pure cape was being reviewed, and there was like a 90% chance that you weren't keeping the cape. Everybody would ask me about it. I'm like, look, dude, I can do it for you, but the chances of it surviving is like next to none. But as far as like mains and meds, nah, didn't have any issues.
Jagex takes a hard look at every unusual cape, and even more so back then. But regardless, in the beginning, bans were pretty rare for main accounts. That all changed when the Theater of Blood released. The Theater of Blood is RuneScape's most difficult raid, and finding teammates can be just as difficult. The Infernal cape was a sign of extreme skill at the game, and anyone with one could find a team way easier. Jagex must have predicted this and figured there would be a big uptick in sales.
Top came out about, what, a year or so?
Yeah, about a year after Inferno, I think.
I'd never had a ban before then. Not one. Not one. The day Top came out, I had 3 cape orders. Pretty known friends of mine that decided they wanted a cape just because Top came out. Because that was one of the requirements that a lot of people had. If you were looking for a team or trying to look for a group initially, if you had a cape, people automatically like picked you over like somebody else. So I gave a lot of people capes. All those 3 people, first ban wave that came out, 2 out of 3 got banned. And I talked to a couple other capers. They all said the same thing. They said nobody before that had been banned. But if you got your cape the day of Top or after, you could have possibly caught a ban. What we think actually happened when they snuck the Top update in there is they snuck in some new detection tools.
Now, cape sellers obviously changed their methods to try and counteract some of these bans, but I'm not going to discuss what they are for obvious reasons. Now that you know his backstory, let's fast forward to today and ask the questions I'm sure you're all really curious about. These days, you see Infernal capes pretty much everywhere. As time goes on and more updates come out, the Inferno is getting much easier and new ways of earning capes are developed. But it's still really hard, and sometimes you have to wonder just how many of these capes are legit. We all have that one friend who suspiciously has an Infernal cape, even though he seems to die every time you go bossing with them. Unfortunately, a lot of the times, I am that friend. But even so, that's not the point. There's a lot of capes, and they can't all be legit. Now, Caper is just one seller and an ocean of rule breakers, but he alone farms hundreds of capes every year.
So I have a capes completed section. Right now I'm at 844. That is individual customers. So that doesn't include if somebody ordered, say, 5, or say they wanted one on each of their accounts.
Overall, if you had to take a guess, how many Infernal capes in RuneScape right now are done by cape sellers?
I'd say over 70% of the capes that are done by capers.
The idea that 70% of the capes in game right now are done by sellers just blew my mind. But if you think that's crazy, we're just getting started. You might be wondering, why would somebody order, let's say, 10 capes in a row? Well, it's for the pet. The only bigger flex than an Infernal cape is the Zuck pet. Then again, I'm biased because it's my favorite pet, but even so, getting one can take hundreds of attempts and thousands of hours. So how many pet hunts have you actually done for people?
So I've done 15 cape pet hunts from start to finish, and that's after their first cape. I did 72 capes for one guy, but he had so much money. This man had more money than we'll probably ever see in our lives between the 2 of us. He showed me his PayPal balance, and it was $1.7 million. $1.7 million in PayPal balance.
I've gotta say, if I had nearly $2 million on hand, there would be a lot of other things I would do before spending it on RuneScape, but that's just me. However, they do say the best things in life are free, like your ability to press the like button right now. Recently, Jagex released Combat Achievement Diaries into Old School RuneScape. The Grandmaster challenges are near impossible, and it took over a week for the first player to complete them all. They contain a ton of ridiculously difficult Inferno challenges, like no magic, no twisted bow, and even having to kill all 3 Jads on wave 68 within 30 seconds after killing the first one. So have you seen an uptick in orders since Grandmaster challenges launched, or no?
No, No, because most of the people who want the combat achievements done are good enough to do them themselves, because like the 5-man top times, the 3-man top times. So if you're good enough to do all that other stuff, you're probably good enough to do it on your Inferno. The only things that I've been selling more of is like 65-minute Inferno runs, because obviously they're harder to do. I've sold those forever. Oblivion went through a spell, right? I don't know if you know about this or not, where they like kept lowering the time required for Inferno. There's only a couple guys on the market that could have done it, and I'm one of them.
If you don't understand what he meant in that last part, let me explain. A few years back, Old School's most prestigious PVM clan introduced a new requirement, that all members will need to have completed the Inferno in under 85 minutes. To put that into perspective, I've successfully completed the Inferno 10 times, and my best time is probably almost an hour longer. Anyway, Caper says he managed to make a ton of sales through this clan, because a ton of them simply couldn't do it. The requirement was later removed, but because the 65-minute Inferno is still a Grandmaster challenge that even seasoned players can't do, he still makes sales. Now, I mentioned earlier that as time goes on, the Inferno has gotten easier. Combine that with sellers getting better at it and more sellers entering the business, and obviously the price has gone down. But in some cases, the price has increased beyond that initial $500 cape from 2017. The reason? Iron Men. Ironic. The game mode centered around paving your own way and being entirely self-sufficient is also full of people buying capes. Anyway, jokes aside, farming gear like a blowpipe or twisted bow can take months, maybe even years if you get unlucky. So Iron Men will pay extra to have Caper do it for them in cheaper gear.
So there's been a couple times where I've done some crazy like off the wall capes. So I did a UIM recently with 6 missing slots, an MSB and RCB, and that one was like $1,100, and I second rounded it, which was a great feeling. That means the second try that I went in there, I finished it. So a lot of people think that like every cape's done on the first try. So that's total BS. Like even people who do this every day make a mistake and die and they'll redo it. Some people ask me about that and I'm like, look, there's no way that I would have any business if you were paying for attempts, not completions. Because what's to stop me from just dying once or twice and making you pay more money? You know, I was like, you're paying for a completion, that's it.
There was one group of players specifically he's done capes for that I found especially interesting. Streamers. So have you ever done a cape for a streamer where they sort of stream and just pretend that they're doing it?
Yes, multiple times. The best part is you can see it. You can just see the person faking it, and it's so fun to me. And it's so cringy, but I just don't care.
For the most part in the past, if somebody streamed themselves getting the cape, it was without a doubt seen as entirely legit. In fact, I was even proud to say that I got my first cape on stream, because anyone that doubted my ability could literally go back and see me get it. Although I don't like to share it because of my cringe freakout reaction. Yes, dude! Nice. Yes! Anyway, back on topic, I'm not saying you should pull out the pitchforks and witch hunt every Infernal cape ever streamed on Twitch, it's just something I find interesting. Another thing I find interesting about these underground services is the competition. So you've been doing this for a long time and there's quite a few sellers now. Is there any sort of competition between you guys?
Yeah, sure is. So a lot of the capers, back when this first came out, it was like the Wild West, dude. Everybody wanted to throw down against everybody because everybody thought they were the best. There were 3 main big names that were like OG names that I can think of. But I didn't ever market myself. I was more of like the clan guy, like your friend of like friends of friends, and I was also cheaper than both of the others.
There was one cape seller who took it further than others.
On his main advertising page for a while, saying if you bring a caper picture of your account being banned and you're getting it from another caper, I'll give you X amount off per cape. And he would advertise all of these capes like another caper got somebody's account banned.
Ultimately, the forum admins made him stop, but it was an effective marketing trick. Now, in his free time, Caper does actively play Old School RuneScape for fun, but even a single mistake can ruin all his progress.
I had 7 accounts, I think, at the time, but I messed up and my VPN dropped mid-cape. Didn't know. That customer obviously got a 14-day ban. All 7 of my accounts got IP banned the next day. Gone. and I'd had the foresight to move a lot of the money off of them. That's the one time they ever like caught me, took an L on that. And ever since then, I've played the game for the most part. It's been fine. I've maxed out 2 accounts on Old School RuneScape, and I'm working on a 3rd one right now.
Caper might be one of the largest sellers in the space and could support himself off cape income, but he's chosen to keep his real-life job. Because you never know, Jagex could implement changes that decimate the market, or the game itself could disappear one day, which it actually kinda has done a few times in the past. But for now, as long as it exists, Caper will keep doing the Inferno. Now, I love the Inferno. It's easily one of my favorite pieces of content in the game, but originally it kinda sucked. Check out the video on the right hand side of the screen right now to learn about its amazing redemption arc.